In the quiet woods of Vermont, a couple decided to rent a house for what they hoped would be a peaceful getaway. Little did they know this vacation house would turn into a haunting experience that would forever change their views on the paranormal. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. In today's episode, we will share a collection of creepy true Airbnb horror stories. But before starting the video, please consider giving us a like. Also, if you have any terrifying or unnerving experiences of your own, feel free to reach out and share your story with us. Who knows, it might even be featured in one of our future episodes. This took place a few years ago when my friends and I decided to book an Airbnb to celebrate Christmas. We found a nice one at a good price, but it was in a quiet rural area. What we didn't know was that it was right across from an old graveyard, which made us feel a bit uneasy. After a long and tiring drive, we finally arrived, unpacked all our bags, and took a moment to relax. The house was nice, with wooden floors and big windows that let in plenty of light. After settling in, we decided to explore the area. There were a few houses down the road, but most of the land around us was empty. A large field with tall, dry grass surrounded the area. Then we saw the graveyard, but we didn't go inside. A couple of days later, we were in the kitchen after dinner, just relaxing. It was already dark, and the time was around 10:30 when one of my friends suggested that we explore the graveyard since we hadn't gone inside yet. We talked about it for a while, and two of my friends decided to stay at the house. That left three of us to go exploring. We found a flashlight, put on our jackets, and crossed the street. As we walked into the graveyard, we could hear the sound of dry leaves under our feet. We spent some time walking between the graves, reading the names on the stones. The friend with the flashlight walked ahead, leaving the two of us in complete darkness. Now the girl who stayed with me started to panic and quickly ran toward the friend with the light. In her rush, she didn't notice the grave in front of her and accidentally tripped over it, stumbling forward. As she was trying to steady herself, she stepped again without looking and tripped over the same tombstone, falling even harder this time. Her hands hit the ground and she let out a nervous laugh, still shaken from the scare. She was fine, thankfully. Nothing unusual happened at the graveyard, so we felt a little let down. Later we went to bed, and I was sharing a bed with the girl who had tripped earlier. Around 2 a.m., she suddenly shook me awake, looking really scared. She whispered that she had heard knocking on the window right beside our bed. The room was dark, and the only sound we could hear was the wind outside. We stayed quiet for a few minutes, but we didn't hear anything. I lay back down, but as soon as I did, I heard knocking on the wall. It wasn't loud, but clear enough to make us both freeze in fear. By this point, we were really scared. We told ourselves that if we heard it again, we would wake up our friends. We stayed as quiet as possible, staring at the ceiling and listening. After a few long minutes, we suddenly heard two sharp knocks on the bed frame right beside us. Our hearts were racing, and without thinking, we jumped out of bed and rushed to wake our friends. They listened to us but didn't believe anything strange was happening. Even now, we still don't know what caused those knocks, and it still gives us chills whenever we think about it. My girlfriend and I went on a vacation to the woods of Vermont just before the pandemic started. We drove our old Jeep for hours, passing through small towns and open fields. The air felt fresh as we enjoyed the beautiful mountain views. We could hear the soft sound of birds and leaves rustling as we slowly made our way to the cabin we had rented for our stay. The trip there was amazing. Honestly, I don't think any vacation spot can beat the feeling of driving there in that Jeep. The first night was a lot of fun. We relaxed in the hot tub, looking up at the stars, which were clear and bright without the city lights blocking them. After dinner and watching too many episodes of American Dad, we finally went to bed. In the middle of the night, there was a loud bang at the front door, so strong that it sounded like someone kicked it with all their strength. But then everything went quiet. I lay in bed wondering if it was real or just a dream. The next morning as we ate breakfast, I asked my girlfriend if she had heard it too, and she told me yes, which surprised me. The path to the front door is soft dirt, and there's no way to get to the door without leaving clear footprints. So I opened the metal door and glanced around. I only saw our footprints in the dirt. Nothing else. But then I noticed a dent in the door. The door is made of strong metal, so whatever hit it must have been really powerful. But it was weird that it left no other marks, no tracks, and no signs of what caused it. This was clearly a warning sign, but I didn't let it bother me too much. After checking the house and our vehicle, it was clear that nothing else had been impacted. The second night started just like the first. After a day of exploring, we sat in the hot tub, looked at the stars, had dinner, watched some shows, and then went to bed. But this night would be a bit different. As I lay in bed, I had a strong feeling that someone was watching us. We all know that feeling, and usually there's a reason for it, like a window, the trees, or something just around the corner. It was like the watching was coming from everywhere, almost like the walls were alive. Every inch of the house felt filled with eyes staring at us, making the hair on the back of my neck stand up, like we were not alone in the house, even though we were. There was more to this feeling. I also had a strong sense that if I acknowledged what I was feeling, things would suddenly get a lot worse, so I kept quiet. Sleeping that night was difficult. There weren't many noises, just the sounds of the old house settling, which had been around for hundreds of years. But the feeling grew stronger. It felt like I was trying to sleep while strangers were standing over me in the dark, and I definitely did not get up to use the bathroom that night. The morning of our third and final night was very different. Until then, the uneasy feeling only happened at night, but this time it was just as strong in the morning. I felt like at any moment one wrong move would make 100 angry spirits start tearing the place apart. Needless to say, leaving that place for another day of adventures was a huge relief. Staying in that house on our third and final night felt like a complete nightmare. I felt completely out of control. Lying in bed, I kept feeling touches all over my body, on my feet, shoulder, ear, and even in my hair. My girlfriend was next to me, but she was also restless, tossing and turning. I could hear soft breathing nearby, like someone was right next to us, even though we were alone. I also experienced odd tingling sensations that made my skin crawl. There were all kinds of noises coming from the main part of the house, like footsteps and things being moved. It sounded like there was a big Thanksgiving gathering happening out there. That uneasy feeling grew stronger by the minute. Finally, around 2:30 a.m., I was ready to take us home. I was very worried about what would happen if I talked about what was going on, or even moved my body, but I knew I had to get us out of there. It was time to wake my girlfriend, throw everything in the back of the truck, and leave this place behind. As I carefully turned to her, I felt a wave of anxiety. And here's where it gets even worse. My girlfriend is an extremely light sleeper, but not tonight. She lay there, completely still and peaceful, while I felt the weight of the tension in the room. I tried shaking her, pushing her gently and talking to her, but she wouldn't wake up. The stairs to the bedroom were very steep, and if I made one wrong move while carrying her, she could fall and really hurt herself. Since I couldn't wake her, I felt like we were trapped, and I definitely wasn't going to leave her alone in this dangerous situation. So I didn't sleep at all. My girlfriend wouldn't wake up, and I kept feeling strange touches all over my body. It felt like the whole main part of the house was being rearranged, with noises of furniture sliding and things crashing. I could hear what sounded like chairs scraping against the floor and footsteps walking around, but no one was there. As soon as the first light of the sun peeked over the distant mountains, everything suddenly stopped. I managed to wake my girlfriend up, and we quickly did what I had planned to do at 2:30 a.m. without saying a word. It was clear that this rushed morning without coffee or breakfast, and with no communication from me, confused her. But as soon as the house was behind us and we were on the road, we both started talking about the uneasy feeling we had experienced. She also felt like talking about it would set everything off, like a bomb waiting to explode. She had the same feelings I did, but things changed on our third night. She slept deeply, like a rock, and told me it felt like she blinked, and it was already morning. Living in the rural northeastern part of the United States, you can't really be a complete skeptic when it comes to the paranormal. People around here have always shared strange stories, so it's hard to completely ignore the possibility of something unexplained happening. I never believed in the paranormal until I moved out here. My childhood friends and I have had many intense experiences, and some of these happened when we were together. I don't know what was in that house with us, but it didn't seem like just one thing, and it clearly didn't like having guests. So a poltergeist infestation might be a possible explanation for what we experienced. It's not surprising that no one else mentioned this situation in the reviews of the rental. The owners of the rental also review their guests, and nobody wants to be blacklisted on that app, so I'm no exception. This place serves as a strong reminder that when you're out for a walk at night, that feeling of being watched from the tree line past the cobblestone fence isn't always just an animal or your mind playing tricks on you. Sometimes there's something more. In July 2019, my three best friends and I made plans for a vacation to Barcelona. We were all 18 at the time, just finishing our first year of college and excited for our first big trip together. The four of us, all girls, had been talking about this trip for months, daydreaming about exploring the city, visiting famous sites, and enjoying the local food. Even though we had plenty of time to get everything ready, we ended up waiting until the last minute to book our flights and Airbnb. We finally started looking for a place in May, which wasn't the best timing. If you've ever been to Barcelona, you know it's hard to find something affordable and in a good location during the summer. We spent days scrolling through different websites, checking out dozens of options, but most were either too expensive or too far from the city center. It felt like every good spot was booked and everything left was way out of our budget. Then one of my friends finally found a nice studio apartment near the Ramblas, a busy tourist area full of shops and restaurants. The studio was on a narrow street that crossed the main Rambla, so it wasn't too crowded. We had to walk about 500 meters to reach the quieter, more run-down end of the street where the apartment was located. Even though it seemed a bit less lively, we didn't mind because the building felt safe. To enter, you had to unlock the main front door, which opened to the street. After that, we had to take the stairs to the second floor, where there was another door that needed a key. This door led to 3 apartments, and we had a third key for our own place. The door to our apartment didn't have a handle on the outside, so if we forgot our keys, we would be locked out. The balcony door was the same. There was no handle on the outside, and it could only be opened from the inside. Now, it may seem like a lot of details, but it's important for what happens next. The day we checked in, we were really excited, even though we were completely exhausted from traveling for 15 hours. Despite being tired, we decided to relax and went to the balcony. The balcony next to ours belonged to our neighbors, a group of Italian guys who we met for the first time. They had been quite loud during our stay, but we didn't think much of it. Just to give you more context, our apartment was arranged like this. The front door opened into the main room, where 2 of my friends were sleeping. The bed was on the left, and at the end of the room was the living area, which also served as a cooking area and bedroom where my third friend and I were sleeping. We stayed there for 5 nights. As young women, our daily routine was pretty simple. We would go clubbing every night, come back home around 4 a.m., crash in our beds, and wake up at 11 a.m. during the day. We explored the city until 7 p.m., then got ready to do it all over again. Our first 3 nights were great because we had some male friends in Barcelona too, and we met up with them, which was a lot of fun. But the 4th night was really creepy. We got home around 4 a.m., chatted with my friends for another hour, and finally fell asleep by 5. At about 7:30, my friend who was sleeping with me in the living room and has sleep paralysis suddenly woke up because she felt something tickling her ankle. Confused and scared, she opened her eyes and saw a figure crouching at the end of the bed. The person had their hand on her ankle as if they were searching for something under the bed. The room was dim, and she could hardly believe what she was seeing, which made her feel even more frightened. So she thought she was having sleep paralysis again. But the fear made her sit up in bed and shout, "What the heck?" Now this is unusual during sleep paralysis, since your muscles usually feel numb. Her shouting woke me up, and I saw the guy at the end of the bed too. The guy got scared, quickly stood up, stared at us with wide eyes, and then tiptoed away. He walked right past the bed where my friends were sound asleep, completely unaware, and slipped out through the front door. My friend and I were in shock and stayed awake for a long time, whispering about what had just happened and trying to make sense of it. Eventually, we decided to wake up the other girls and told them everything. But we never figured out how this guy got into our apartment. He didn't take anything, even though we had carelessly left our credit cards, IDs, phones, and cash on the table, all in plain sight. The only thing was that we didn't lock the front door that night, thinking we were safe. Normally, no one should have been able to open it since there was no handle, so it made us wonder if he had a key or somehow managed to get in without one. We decided not to talk to the police about it because we were afraid they might say it was our fault for not locking the door properly. We also didn't tell the landlord for the same reason, plus we didn't want to ruin our last day there. But we tried to contact our neighbors, the Italian guys. We went to their apartment and knocked on their door, but they never answered. Looking back, we definitely should have done something about it and should not have stayed there for another minute. But I guess we were too young to think clearly. We could never figure out what the guy wanted or what he was looking for under the bed. None of this makes sense, to be honest. Why would someone go into an apartment uninvited at 7:30 a.m. to look for something while the people inside are asleep? I guess we'll never know. In early spring 2016, when I had just turned 24, my friend and I arrived at our usual camping spot, Black Canyon Rim Campgrounds near Payson. The campground was surrounded by tall pine trees with a wide view of the mountains in the distance. We could hear birds singing, and the fresh scent of pine filled the air. We usually came here 2 or 3 times a year to escape the noise of the city. The views were always amazing, and the drive was only a couple of hours away, making it a perfect weekend getaway. This area was mostly quiet and away from people. There was a small privately owned store a few miles away, and a small town about 20 miles before that. The entrance to the campground was on a dirt road right off the highway. A sign at the start of the road gave information about local wildlife, fire warnings, and other news for campers. The road was mostly straight, with just one split, and stretched for several miles. We once even followed the dirt road to see how far it went. One path led to another highway entrance with a ranger's tower standing about halfway along. The other path ended with nowhere to go, just a dead end surrounded by thick forest. A few miles down this path, there was an old abandoned cabin, hidden behind tall trees and large bushes. The cabin looked run down, with broken windows and overgrown plants all around it, making it seem like it had been forgotten for years. By this time, most of the snow had melted, leaving the air fresh and cool. The animals were starting to be active again, and we would often see wild horses running in the distance, several deer grazing, and plenty of small animals like squirrels and rabbits scurrying around. We arrived around 4 p.m. on a Tuesday, but that was late for us, as we usually tried to get there by noon at the latest. This trip was last minute, and we both had work coming up on the weekend and decided to just go for it. The sun was setting quickly, and we still hadn't chosen a spot to camp. There were only 2 other groups, both families parked near the entrance, just a few hundred yards from the highway. But we just wanted to get away from people for a while. Working in customer service can make you feel that way. So we drove down the dirt road past our usual spot and finally found the perfect place. It was a small clearing on the edge of a hill. From there, we could see the entire valley, and the sunset was really beautiful. This would have become our main camping spot if what happened the next night hadn't occurred. We decided to start a campfire and skip setting up a tent this time. We didn't have much time anyway, and her car wasn't too bad for sleeping. I would sleep in the back seat and she would take the front passenger seat. We left the window slightly open, had a few blankets for each of us, and soon drifted into a peaceful sleep. The next day was pretty calm. We just relaxed and took it easy. However, I had a weird feeling all day, like someone was watching us. I heard leaves crunching nearby every few hours, but I thought it was just the local animals moving around. My friend didn't notice anything unusual, so I tried not to think about it too much. Night came, and the strange feeling still hadn't gone away. My friend must have felt something too, even though she didn't say it out loud. She fell asleep in the front passenger seat while I tried to relax in the back. I leaned against the side window behind the passenger seat with my legs stretched out to the back door. The window across from me was rolled down a little, and a cold breeze came in. I had been on my phone scrolling through random things or something when I heard a noise outside. I heard some leaves crunching a few steps away from the car. So I whispered to my friend, "Did you hear that?" But she was already asleep. I put my phone down and listened carefully for a minute or two, but heard nothing. It must have been a small animal curious about our camp. I went back to my phone and kept scrolling through social media. About 10 minutes later, I heard it again. I lowered my phone. My eyes took a moment to adjust from the light of the screen to the darkness of the woods. When I turned the phone away from me, the backlight lit up the window by my feet. But to this day, I still can't forget what I saw. 2 dirty, scabbed hands were holding onto the window, with the fingers reaching into the car. The nails were long, messy, and dark. A face was pressed against the window behind those hands. Every few seconds I could see breath making the glass foggy. All I could see were the reflections of those empty black eyes. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. It felt like forever as I stared at this thing. Thoughts kept repeating in my head. Why hadn't they run away when they saw me notice them? What were they planning? After what felt like 10 seconds of just standing there, the hands slowly let go of the window and moved back into the darkness. The fog on the glass cleared. A few seconds later, I heard the dreaded crunch, 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 slowly fading into the distance. I just sat there, my mind racing. Why didn't I do anything? Why am I still frozen? With that thought, adrenaline shot through my body. I pounded on my friend's seat, waking her up from her sleep in a confused state, her eyes wide and blinking. I quickly unlatched the back door, kicked it open with a loud thud, and took a moment to scan the dark woods around us. The air was cold and still, and the only sound was the faint rustling of leaves. My heart raced as I searched for any signs of that thing, feeling a mix of fear and urgency. Whoever they were, whatever it was gone. I hurried to grab any important camping supplies we had left outside and stuffed everything into the back seat and trunk, glancing over my shoulder now and then to listen for those footsteps. Then I slammed the back door shut, and then I saw it. 2 handprints were pressed against the window. In a panic, I quickly wiped them away, trying to erase what had happened. Then I jumped into the front seat, started the car, and drove away fast. My friend, finally waking up, asked me what I was doing. I said, "We gotta go, there's someone." I didn't see whatever or whoever it was while we were leaving. Speeding down the dirt road, my friend insisted that I slow down, and I finally did. We reached the highway and drove about 20 miles until we got to Adeni's. My friend asked us to stop there to eat and talk about everything. I still feel embarrassed about how shocked I was at that moment. Everyone says you either have a fight or flight instinct, but I'm not sure which I have. I just sat there and did nothing. Was it another camper playing tricks on us? A person living in the abandoned cabin down the dirt road? Or maybe something supernatural lurking in the forest, watching lonely campers as they drift off to sleep? We continued to camp there in the following years, but always stayed close to the highway. My name is Natalia, but people call me Tali. I'm a 20-year-old language student from Leicester, and right now I'm spending a year abroad in Bordeaux in the south of France. I haven't made a lot of friends here because I'm not much of a party person like my big sister, but the few friends I do have are very important to me. Now, I won't go into too much detail about my life here, but after the first few months, not much has happened. I did have a couple of small problems with some local troublemakers, but nothing serious. Overall, I've been enjoying myself. The food is amazing. There are lots of fresh pastries and cheeses to try, and the city is full of old buildings and charming streets. I love walking around and exploring. The weather is much better than back home, with sunny days most of the time. A couple of weeks ago, we went on a trip around the south to my friend Clement's hometown, John. There are many small, beautiful villages in the countryside, surrounded by green hills and vineyards. The villages are quiet and peaceful, and since tourists don't usually visit this area, the locals are sometimes surprised to see someone from another country. Not far from Jean, there is a slightly bigger village called Augeny-les-Bains. It's another beautiful and quiet part of the country that not many people know about, except the locals. The village has lovely old buildings, and there's even a famous Michelin star restaurant there. So we decided to go to the restaurant for my boyfriend Brad's 23rd birthday. It was a special night because it was also almost our 2nd anniversary, as we met 2 years ago. The food was amazing, and we had a wonderful time celebrating together. He took time off work to visit me in France, and we were happy to finally spend some time together again. We booked a table for 4 at the restaurant, me, Brad, Clement, and his girlfriend, Jeanette. At first, we wanted to stay at the restaurant's hotel, but it was too expensive for students like us, so we booked an Airbnb on the edge of town instead. We enjoyed a nice meal and then sat outside drinking wine like true French people. After that, we took a late-night walk through the town and admired the cute little frog statues around the area. When we got too tired, we decided to head back to our Airbnb to rest for the night before going to our next destination. We finally made it back to our room and had another glass of wine before going to bed around 1 a.m. But I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of something scratching by the door or the window. I couldn't tell since I had never been there before. I wondered if it could have been a dog, or maybe another small animal like a cat. The sounds went away almost as quickly as they started, and I soon fell back asleep. Not long after, I woke up again. But this time, it wasn't because of a sound from outside. It was because Brad had gotten up to use the bathroom. I lay back down on the pillow and closed my eyes, trying to relax. But then, a sudden feeling of fear washed over me. I don't know how, but I felt like someone was watching me. Then I glanced at the window, which should have been closed with the shutters, but since Brad wasn't used to living here, he forgot to lock it. My heart raced as I listened closely, hoping to hear nothing unusual, but I could see a hand outside slowly pulling the window open. The hand was holding something that looked shiny, but I couldn't make out what it was. Then I heard a sound like an old-fashioned camera shutter closing over and over. It was a clicking noise that reminded me of my grandfather taking family photos years ago. I hadn't heard that sound in so long, but because I remembered it so well, I knew exactly what it was. What felt like forever went by before I could finally open my mouth and yell out to Brad. The person at the window quickly began to climb down, and for a moment in the moonlight, I saw a clear glimpse of a very unique ring on their left hand. I didn't get a good look at it, but it looked wooden and had a special marking on one side. Brad rushed outside to see who it was, but all he found was an empty street, and he could hear footsteps getting farther away in the darkness. Neither of us slept at all the rest of the night. We were too frightened to close our eyes, listening for any strange sounds and feeling anxious every time the wind rustled outside. As soon as the sun came up, we checked out of the room as early as we could. Clement and Jeanette went to get the car while Brad and I returned the keys to the lockbox. Later, I told the host about what happened, and while he seemed sorry, he said he wouldn't do anything about it. A few days have passed, and we still don't know who tried to break in. Brad thinks it was the host because he wasn't very apologetic. Clement says it's because they're rich snobs who don't care about foreigners, so we'll probably never find out who it was. But the creepiest part for me is that someone might have a photo of me lying in bed, and I have no idea who has it. In October 2017, my band and I were halfway through a 2-week tour across Europe. We had been performing in different cities, meeting fans, and enjoying the journey. But there's one thing that happened during the tour that will stay with me forever. Even now, I can't fully understand or explain what took place. It still doesn't make sense to me. There were 4 of us, driving around Europe in a Honda Jazz that we brought from Scotland, along with our musical equipment and clothes. Some places we played at, including this one, gave us a place to stay and food on top of paying us, which was great. After spending up to 9 hours in a cramped car, we definitely didn't want to refuse any offers like that. Some of the band members were excited to go out and explore the local nightlife. They wanted to see what the town had to offer, but I felt tired and just wanted to relax. All I wanted was to lie down, unwind, and scroll through my phone. The tour was nearly over, and I was really in need of some quiet time. We were shown to our room. We thought it would be a basic room with just a bed and a bathroom, but to our surprise, it was one of the most modern Airbnbs I had ever seen, with stylish furniture, a nice bed, and even a large window with a great view of the city. It was way better than we expected, and I was more than happy to stay there and relax. There were 2 large bedrooms, both with king-size beds, a shower, and even a jacuzzi bath. The kitchen was huge and fully equipped with beautiful wooden floors. I chose to sleep on the floor in the living and kitchen area on my blow-up mattress. The space was open, connecting the bedrooms and bathrooms like a shared common area. While my bandmates were getting ready to go out, I noticed a leaflet on the kitchen table. It said that this building had been standing since 1260, which was really amazing because the place looked so modern. The building had been renovated so much that you couldn't see any of the old designs anymore. I said goodbye to my bandmates as they left, and one of them mentioned they were planning to take a bath when they got back. My bed was right in the middle of the common area, close to all the doors. After they left, I turned over and quickly fell asleep, feeling tired from the long day. But after a while, I woke up to the steady sound of a dripping tap. The room was mostly dark, but my eyes adjusted quickly. The soft glow of the city lights slipped through the cracks in the blinds, casting faint shadows on the floor. At first, I was annoyed with my bandmate for not turning off the tap properly after his bath, even though I found out later that he never actually had one. I turned over and saw that it was about 3:30 a.m. on the wall clock. I threw the blankets over my head and tried to close my eyes again. Then something strange happened. It felt like a heavy weight suddenly pressed down on the bottom left corner of my bed. It felt like being on a bouncy castle where the weight shifts from one side to the other and makes the opposite side bounce up. But this time, it launched me about an inch into the air. It was the first time I felt real fear, like a cold shock running down my spine, probably from the adrenaline. I remember I stopped breathing, my heart was racing, and the room was completely silent. I felt it again, but this time it was less sudden, almost like a kid nudging you for attention. I remember thinking, this isn't just in your head, this is really happening. Terrified, I threw the blankets off and peered down at the foot of my bed. At first, I didn't see anything, but then I looked further back past the dining table, which was about 2 feet away from my bed. That's when I noticed a shape standing there. It was dark and hard to make out, but I could feel it watching me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was not right. I blinked several times to make sure, but I swear I saw a girl with no face and long hair that went down to her feet. She was about 5 feet 6 inches, as pale as could be, and she seemed almost wet, like she had just been caught in the rain. I tried to scream, but I couldn't make any sound, so I quickly threw the blanket over myself and told myself to go to sleep. I don't remember falling asleep, but when I woke up, I saw one of my bandmates sitting at the dining table, working on his laptop. I was so relieved to see that it was daytime. The sunlight was streaming through the cracks in the blinds, making everything feel warm and safe. I jumped up right away and rushed to tell my bandmate what happened, but he told me it was all a dream and to calm down. Just then, my other bandmate, Gary, who had slept in one of the bedrooms, woke up and joined us. He walked into the kitchen with a slow, unsteady gait and looked pale as a ghost. I asked him if he was okay, but I figured he was just hungover from the fun we had the night before. Still, there was something off about his expression. After we packed our things, 2 of the guys went to get the car, while Gary and I watched over our bags in the lobby enjoying some coffee. I asked Gary how he slept, but before I could say anything else, he replied. I stared at him for a few seconds and asked what had happened, thinking it might be a funny random story or something interesting, but I couldn't have been more wrong. I should mention that Gary and I are skeptics. That doesn't mean we don't believe in ghosts. We just need proof before believing anything without question. As we sat there sipping our coffee, he began to tell me what happened. He said that in the middle of the night, he felt someone climb into bed with him. At first, he thought it was one of the other band members playing a prank, but when he turned to see who it was, he found nothing but the empty space beside him. Then he described feeling a cold weight on the bed, as if someone was lying there, but he couldn't see anyone. He woke up feeling the blanket lift and someone sliding into bed next to him. He told me he was too scared to move or call out, so he just tried to make himself fall asleep like I did, and he never ended up taking the bath he had planned. That explained why he looked so pale when he woke up. He hadn't planned to tell anyone because it sounded too unbelievable. We stared at each other for a moment and agreed that we would never spend another night in Zurich.